Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth.
Hello and welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. I'm Moses Brattrud, this is Grace Evans, and we are back for Season 3!
Oh yeah!
Woo!
We are so pumped to be back, guys. Originally, we were thinking, okay, we're going to wait until the first week of February to restart. We are going to have a whole new podcasting setup, et cetera, but there has just been so much crazy stuff happening in the Minnesota legislature right now. We are fighting for life, family, and religious freedom every single day at the Capitol, and there's so much to update you on, and we have to give you the facts right now so you can stand for truth.
Absolutely. I was literally going to say that.
Sorry, stealing your thunder.
Work in that tagline. So many facts, guys. So we're going to keep it simple, though, and also keep it quick because we could just go on.
There's a lot happening.
Yeah. So let me back up for a second, though, because I want to say we're really excited to be in our new office.
That's right.
New studio. It's gonna just get better and better. I hope the audio and video is fine in terms of quality, guys, but we're always working on improving that. So now we're going to talk about a couple pieces of legislation, a couple bills that are working their way through the Minnesota legislature today.
It is fast and furious this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason that that it's like the threat level is very high right now is because of the word that people use is trifecta. Mm-hmm. So in previous years, one party controlled the Senate, another party controlled the House, but now the Democrats, the DFL, control the governor's mansion, the House, and the Senate. So that gives them a lot of power to push through legislation that doesn't really match the interest of Minnesotans.
No, it doesn't protect life, family, or religious freedom.
Yeah, certainly it doesn't do those things. So we're going to walk you through a couple pieces of legislation, and these are some of the worst bills we've seen in my time at Minnesota Family Council. Yep. I'm starting my 5th year here, and also, unfortunately,
I think I'm right behind you, boss, on that. Almost 5 years.
Some of the worst bills that also have a good chance of passage. So that is what we're really worried about today. In fact, by the time you hear this, the PRO Act is going to be voted on today. That's January 19th. That's going to be voted on this afternoon in the House. It could have a Senate
very
vote.
Lethal bill.
Yeah, a very lethal bill. Grace is going to talk about that. So, I'm sorry, I'm really talking quickly today, and that is because we just need to focus on what's happening and really keep you guys informed.
We have a lot of adrenaline going because actually right after this, guys, we're right next to the Capitol now in our new office. We are literally going to walk over to the Capitol and run some peaceful interference with this radical bill that the legislators are going to be debating.
Yeah, our fellow our MFC fellows are there as we speak, working and praying with legislators, helping to run the resistance for this lethal bill, which is called the Protect Reproductive Options Act. And one thing I think that people need to know, Grace, is that this is HF1 and SF1.
Yes, I was going to bring that up.
That means it was the first bill introduced this session in both the Minnesota House and Senate.
This was the number one priority.
Yeah.
Their number one priority, you guys, was to kill babies. So let's break it down. Yeah. So this is, again, the PRO Act in brief, but it is called the Protect Reproductive Options Act. And, of course, it's very deceptively named. This is just a euphemism, as we know. It does nothing to do it does not protect reproductive options or whatever. It is not about health care. It is not about those things. What it is about is it's about murder. What this bill would do, if it was passed, is it would codify the right to abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. And, Moses, that would be right up to the moment of birth. Right up to the moment of birth. So there is no respect for the baby's development or health or the safety of the pregnant mother found within this bill. It is a terrible bill for so many reasons. It is so radical, so lethal, and we are fighting hard against it. Like you said, the Church Ambassador Network team is down there at the Capitol right now praying with legislators. Our acting director of public policy, Becca Delahunt, is there right now as we speak as well, just doing her job so well. And we have a lot of concerns with this bill, but the major concern is that it would legalize abortion up to live birth, and that is being voted on today. There's a floor session happening in like 3 hours, right, Moses? 3 hours. Yep. And we are doing everything in our power to stop it from passing.
That's right. And so I think a little bit of context, let's think about what's happened in the last year. So in the last year, first of all, we had the Dobbs v. Jackson decision. So that overturned Roe v. Wade right in front of its 50th anniversary, which is actually tomorrow or within a couple days is the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. But we don't have to worry about that anymore because Dobbs v. Jackson overturned that bill or overturned that decision. But now in Minnesota and unfortunately in other states across the country, progressive legislators are trying to say, okay, whoa, we don't have the protection of Roe v. Wade now. We need to make sure that abortion is legal under state statute, because we've seen the case in like Wisconsin where they had an abortion ban from like the 19th century, and it was still on the books. And so when Roe v. Wade was overturned, abortion automatically became illegal in Wisconsin. Now, unfortunately, I think abortions are still being done there, but they had that starting place. So now in Minnesota, progressive legislators are scrambling, now that they have control of the state government, to pass bills like the PRO Act. So Grace has talked about the PRO Act a little bit, but the PRO Act is actually really short. It really does just create that so-called right to reproductive health care
up to the moment of live birth.
Yeah, and by doing so, it actually has a companion bill, which we call the how-to of the PRO Act, or the infanticide bill.
The infanticide bill.
And this, if you want to Google this, it's HF 91 or SF 70, and this is and first of all, we'll have this in the notes. So Minnesota Family Council and True North Legal are fighting hard. We've been in every committee hearing for these bills. We've been testifying against these. We've been bringing other people to testify, attorneys, moms, people who have who can speak to this, who can help legislators.
We have been spearheading the resistance, I would say. We've been coordinating.
Along with our ally groups.
Yes, absolutely. And so, this is a terrible bill. Moses is going to break it down for you guys.
Yeah, so the nuts and bolts of this bill, essentially a couple things that it does. First of all, taxpayer funding of abortions. Now, I want to say at the beginning, this is something that at least 60% of Americans disapprove of, and the numbers are similar for Minnesotans. It's not like a majority of Minnesotans is out there clamoring to be able to pay for abortions. That's just not the case. In fact, people generally oppose this. Whatever their views are on abortion, right? They don't want to have to pay for it. They don't think taxpayers should be doing that. So currently under Minnesota law, for very poor women who are receiving medical assistance payments from the state, abortions can be paid for in the case of rape, incest, or when the life of the mother is in danger. But now this will expand to elective abortion, abortion on demand for women who are receiving Medicaid/medical assistance. So this is really, that's really frightening. It's a massive expansion of the abortion state. It really is going to encourage women to come here. Last season we talked about the risk of Minnesota becoming an abortion mecca, a place.
Destination.
An abortion destination where people are coming from out of state. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen right now with this bill, because it even could be, it could even now be paid for with taxpayer dollars. Also, what we see HF 91 do is it basically obliterates almost all Minnesota pro-life laws, including especially the parental notification, where a minor girl has to notify both parents in order to get an abortion, or get a court order that would vacate that requirement. But this would take that away completely. So we could have a situation where actually abusers are taking young girls to get abortions.
And the parents have no knowledge.
We could even see that being done by school workers or social workers.
Yep. And Planned Parenthood's track record on this and other abortion providers is absolutely devastating and terrible. I mean, they have covered up for people that they have believed to be sex traffickers before. And so we know Planned Parenthood is not out to help vulnerable girls. What they are out for is money. And unfortunately, abusers will give money to Planned Parenthood if they are trying to get an abortion for a child that they have abused. So
that reminded me, Grace, of a picture I saw. Let's not pretend that Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers are just going to sit by. Like they feel that they did a lot to help Democrats get elected and win majorities, and because they feel that, they're ready to collect. They're coming to collect. So I was shown a picture yesterday. I won't give more details, but it was a picture of 3 Planned Parenthood reps sitting in on a legislative hearing, and in Minnesota, right? Like,
was it here?
Yeah, yesterday or a couple days ago, and they're like, they're seated so that they're looking directly at the committee chair. This committee.
Smiling evilly, probably.
Yeah, and they're taking notes.
They're ready to line their pockets with money.
And just like everyone else, Democrats have questions about abortion. They have moral hesitations about it. But Planned Parenthood is there. Planned Parenthood is watching, and they give so much money to candidates. So essentially, what we're seeing is that Democrats, some of them, are afraid to vote for their conscience, for the protection of life, because Planned Parenthood is taking notes, and Planned Parenthood will come.
They've even testified. They've had some of their key figures testify on this bill, being like,
Yeah.
oh, this is for women's empowerment and yada, yada, yada. No, actually, this fails to empower women. There's so many terrible loopholes with these kinds of bills that just utterly, I mean, can you imagine this is the bottom line, every single underage girl in Minnesota deserves to be protected by our laws from potential rapists, abusers, etc. Every girl deserves that. That's the bare minimum. And so the fact that Planned Parenthood will sit over here and other abortion providers will pretend to be pro-woman while being so eager and so ready to cover up terrible abuse, it's devastating.
I wanted to talk, though, before I get too off track, about the worst thing that HF 91
please do.
SF70 does, and that is it legalizes infanticide. So let's be clear about what we're talking about. It repeals the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. So that means when you have a child who's born alive during an abortion,
and it's a failed abortion.
And this happens. This happened at least five
times last
in 2021.
Year. Yes.
Based on data released by the State Department of Health. So this is not some right-wing group that's trying to say, abortions are ending with babies alive all the time. It happens. It happens in Minnesota. It happened 5 times in 2021. Now, what do you want to happen in that scenario? I'm asking you. Let's say that I'm asking you, the audience. Do you want doctors, nurses to have to extend every possible medical life-saving care so that a baby, and again, we're talking about oftentimes when a baby is born alive, we're talking about late-term abortions. So these babies are viable outside the womb.
Absolutely.
They probably need help to breathe. They probably need life-saving
It's talking about leaving that child on a cold sterilization table and letting that child die.
Yeah.
Doing nothing to save that child's life.
This bill takes away that requirement. Physicians, nurses, they don't have to do any stinking thing when a baby is born alive.
Which goes directly against the
abortion.
Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah, so we're essentially, we think that medical practitioners should be trained that anybody on the table is a patient. The woman is a patient. The child is a patient. That's, of course, how it works in obstetrics and gynecology. But that's not how it's going to work now under this new abortion regime if the PRO Act and its companion bill, the How-To Act, are signed into law. So get ready. And when you say infanticide, we're not saying that doctors are going to be going around killing babies with a long knife. What it means is when an abortion it fails and when a baby is born alive, the doctors will be able to let that baby die, which is murder, which is infanticide.
So in one hospital room of the same hospital, this is what could be happening. In one hospital room, we can have a pregnant mother and her husband who are so excited to have their child. And that child is born, and the doctors do everything possible to make sure that child has the best entrance into this world. And then if there's trouble breathing, if that child has trouble breathing, they'll resuscitate that child. They will do everything in their power to let that child live. While in the room next door, in the same exact hospital, doctors can actually be doing the exact opposite. They can be sitting back and letting a child just sit on a cold table and die in front of their eyes. That can happen in a hospital wing, the same exact hospital. Under this
it's just
bill.
a ghoulish thing. So a couple other things is that now I've been told that animals have more protections under Minnesota law.
That's what Renee Carlson, of True North Legal, said.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too into the weeds because I don't want to say anything that's not true. But I've certainly heard our attorney Renee Carlson. She's been very clear. Animal cruelty is very serious. It can be up to a felony. It can even result in prison time. And that's for treatment of animals. But when you have a child in the womb who is undisputably human, whatever is done to that child, there's essentially nothing that can be done to that child other than a violent attack on a woman who's pregnant. Now, that will still, potentially, if that causes the death of a baby, that could still, under Minnesota law, be treated as a homicide, right? So this is a complete double standard.
This is why I have such a problem with it. It's under these bills, these two companion bills, it would just enable certain children to be seen as worthy of life and other children to be seen as unworthy of life based on their level of wantedness. Completely arbitrarily based on, does your mom want you? Yeah. Does your mom want you? If so, your life is worth so much. And if not, your life is worth nothing.
Absolutely.
That's what this bill says.
Absolutely. So these bills, as we've said, the PRO Act is going to have a House vote this afternoon, January 19th. We're expecting a vote in the Senate soon. We are really hopeful. We're praying that either in one or both houses this bill is defeated, because it has to pass both houses to get to the governor's desk. And we're praying in the same way for HF 91, the companion bill. However, there are other concerning bills that are coming up that are coming up through the hearing process, and that could see votes on the House floor and the Senate floor soon. So we want to briefly talk about a couple of those bills, including one that's called the kidnapping bill.
Yeah,
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, let's briefly break these down for you guys, and then we're going to talk about a few wins we've seen too, because we want to leave on a positive note.
Absolutely.
But here's some crazy stuff that's coming down the pipe on gender and sexuality here in Minnesota. The kidnapping bill, which is HF 146 or Senate File 63, this bill would allow it would take custody from parents/guardians when gender-affirming care is denied to their minor son or daughter. So gender-affirming care would include puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and potentially sex mutilation surgeries. So pretty graphic, pretty terrible. But what this would do is, we're calling it the kidnapping bill because it would kidnap children from their parents if parents disagree that their child should literally have their body mutilated. If they disagree with that, under this bill, a child would be taken out of custody of their parents, just because their parents, who always have, which good parents always have the best regard for their child. They are always seeking to serve their child and to protect their child. And so what this bill would do is it would strip parental rights away from parents that are seeking to protect their children from irreversible damage. Heartbreaking, truly heartbreaking. That's the kidnapping bill, guys. I
just saw a story today, Grace. I forwarded it to you. So this is from the Federalist, and I don't think we'll get in depth of this. Maybe we will at a later date. But the title is "Virginia Teen Sex Trafficked Twice After School Hides Gender Identity from Her Parents." So the subtitle here, and this is insane. This is exactly what this bill would do. After this 14-year-old was found being sexually assaulted in another state, a judge kept her from her loving parents because they questioned her transgender identity. Then she was trafficked again.
Is this Chloe Cole? Or is this...
No, this is a completely new story out of Virginia.
Wow.
So this is we're talking about a girl who was 14 who's now 15. We're talking about a girl who identified as transgender, whose parents did not accept that, who was taken away from her parents by the state, and that lack of control and custody allowed her to be sex trafficked not once but twice. Thankfully, she's now back home with her parents, and also she is once more identifying as a girl, the way God created her. And I just think, so first of all, what a horrible story. No one should go through that. The court and the schools were actively complicit in a child being taken away from her parents, and actively complicit in the fact that she was then victimized. And, I just have to take a moment to calm down, because, as a parent, as a dad, the idea that the state could take away custody from my children when I love them, when I'm not doing anything wrong, but just because of the state disagrees with my views on the Bible and on human sexuality.
It opens the floodgates, because what's next then? If this passes, then, what if you're teaching your child about the Bible and your child disagrees with the Bible? So then the state says, this is child abuse, because, it opens the floodgates for things like that with religious freedom.
Yeah.
It absolutely does.
So it does. And a couple other concerning bills. First of all, conversion therapy ban bill. Now, we've talked about this before on the podcast. I won't belabor the point now. Last year, was it last year or was it 2021, Governor Walz issued an executive order which was called a conversion therapy ban at the time. But in fact, this bill would take it much further. This bill, and this is SF23, HF16, if you want to look this up, read the text of the bill, it would ban mental health professionals from helping minors and vulnerable adults as they struggle with sexual and or gender identity. So remember, we're not talking about any type of coercion here. We're talking about patients, counselees, wanting to get counseling and not being able to, because the state is determining that they can't have a goal. If you are a young man and you are dealing with sexual attraction to members of your own sex and you don't want it to be that way, then the state's saying, no, you absolutely cannot go to a counselor who wants to help you meet those goals. And if you do, we might take away that counselor's license.
It's like progressives are saying, follow your heart, except when your heart is telling you to do what's actually right.
Right. Yeah. So, and moreover, and possibly more commonly, we're going to see this with teens who are questioning their gender identity. And nobody is going to be able to tell you, no professional is going to be able to tell your teen, well, hold up, let's take a break from this. Let's start moving backwards. Let's talk about your goals. Your goal is to live in conformity with the body that you've been given, with the attractions that you've been created with. Let's have that as our goal. No. A counselor, a mental health professional will only be able to affirm your goals if they align with the state's desire that any teen who who at one point says I'm transgender is put on a path on a almost like the way that cattle are processed, and they're in a feedlot and they're tunneled into a chute, and then that chute goes into the place where the butchery is done.
Talk about government overreach.
Yeah, so what we're talking about making sure that kids are never hearing from a professional, no, there's another way. You don't have to identify as transgender. Because in many cases, like the story in Virginia that we just heard of, it was this girl was troubled, but she was not, and currently, after about a year, no longer identifies as transgender. But we're talking about mandating that when she goes to a mental health professional, she's saying, no, keep going, take the puberty blockers, take the puberty blockers, get the chest binder, and then you know what? You're getting to the age of 15. Let's start talking about quote unquote gender reassignment surgery. Let's talk about permanent sterilization. It's insane.
It really is. This bill would mandate a terrible, terrible worldview. It would mandate, genuinely, this mandates the manipulation of children. That's what I'm going to say it does. It mandates it. Terrible bill. Yeah. We'll be fighting it.
Yes.
Next bill, comprehensive sex education. Should I walk us through this one or should you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is HF 174. We've talked about comprehensive sex education, or CSE, on the podcast before. Won't belabor the point too much due to that. This bill mandates schools to teach children about the spectrum, quote unquote, of sexuality. So like the genderbread person, what's it called? What's the unicorn one?
The gender unicorn.
The gender unicorn. You guys have probably all seen it.
So unicorns, gender doesn't exist. That's my take on that.
So basically, CSE exposes children to gender identity, and it trains them to think in terms of stereotypes. So if a girl feels like she doesn't fit the stereotype of a girl, then CSE would encourage her to wonder whether her gender identity that she was assigned to at birth was actually wrong and incorrect.
Yeah, and this is starting in kindergarten, guys. The
right.
concepts of gender identity are introduced at the kindergarten level. I've seen the curriculum that has this in it. I'm not making this up.
We've talked about this on the podcast before. Children are so malleable. They are so innocent, and they deserve to be taught the truth about their bodies. Every child in Minnesota deserves to be told, you were born on the right body. Every child deserves that. And this comprehensive sex education would totally do the opposite. And imagine this hand in hand with the so-called conversion therapy ban bill. I mean, envision those two hand in hand. That's what I want our audience to do. Those two.
Plus the kidnapping bill.
Oh, absolutely. Plus the kidnapping bill. All of these together, trifecta again, like you kind of say. It's another kind of trifecta. Yeah. It's just like a boom. And
creating the trans pipeline. Starting in kindergarten, we introduce them to the concept of gender identity. With the conversion therapy ban, so-called, we prohibit them from hearing from professionals any view on that issue except affirm, hormones, surgery,
and then
surgery.
We take them from their parents.
And then if their parents disagree, we take them away. It's absolutely insane. And then, and in fact, the abortion bills we talked about, we didn't even get a chance to talk about how those bills are also related to, this issue.
Yeah, there's so much more in all of these bills. We're just hitting the low points. I want to say, of them. We're hitting some of the main things. There's a lot to unpack. We'll have our acting director of policy on to talk more about them. We'll have Renee Carlson of our True North Legal Initiative on to talk about these. They are our legal experts. They're our legislative experts. They are awesome. And so we will have them on to unpack these in detail. But we wanted to let you guys know these things are coming. PRO Act is already here. They're voting on it today. So by the time you're listening to this, you know how the vote went. And we'll be waiting to hear when the Senate vote happens. I mean, it could probably happen as early as next week. Could it happen on Friday? Because
I've heard a rumor that it could happen tomorrow, but my money's on next week.
Probably next week.
Yeah. But Grace, let's not end on this note. Let's talk about
the positive
the wins,
change.
The positives. Yeah.
Yeah. So want to focus on the positives with MFC briefly. Again, our acting director of policy has been at every single committee hearing about these things. She's been coordinating with her allies, getting the best people to spearhead the fight. And Renee Carlson of True North Legal has done the exact same thing. She's been awesome. She did an amazing testimony yesterday, I believe. It was yesterday, right, Moses?
Yes.
Against PRO Act. Dynamite testimony.
We
Follow
shared it
us
on social media, and that will also be in the show notes.
Yep. Follow us at MN Family Council on Instagram. It's posted there. It's blasted everywhere on our social. She did an amazing job testifying. And so they're just totally killing it at the Capitol. The Church Ambassador Network is also at the Capitol. Now, they're not lobbying, but they are praying for legislators. Yeah. They are there bringing the gospel to our legislators because that's what they really need right now because our Capitol is surrounded in darkness. It seems like it's very surrounded in darkness. Of course, God's presence is there, but there's just so much heaviness happening right now, so many terrible bills being pushed that they need to hear the gospel more than ever. And that is what CAN is doing, the Church Ambassador Network.
Absolutely. And I would say, let's not ever discount that. Like, if you're listening, watching this podcast, maybe you're kind of a political animal, like Grace and I are, but let's remember that prayer changes hearts. Prayer changes minds. So, and the gospel changes hearts.
Yes.
So when we talk about the pastors coming and the pastors praying and the pastors sharing the gospel, that's not an afterthought. That's not secondary to what we do. It's not secondary to our lobbying work. No. It is in many ways our primary work, and we're bringing the gospel to bear is at least as effective as all the testifying and the action alerts and all the other things of the way that we're marshaling our forces and the being a voice for pro-family Minnesotans. We're doing all those things, but bringing pastors to the Capitol and having them pray with legislators, having them open the Word, that's one of the most powerful things we can do. And we're so excited to be part of that.
Prayer is action, period. The president of my school, I go to Bethlehem College in Minneapolis, and Joe Rigney is the president. He did a chapel message on this yesterday, and he said prayer is action.
Amen.
And I thought that was so good. It was so well done. And speaking of my school, there is an amazing community right now. This is just one example of communities that are springing up throughout Minnesota in just response to this terrible agenda, and especially PRO Act right now. One example, there's a pro-life club at my school. It's going awesome. There's so many students involved and passionate, but so much of the student body is actually fasting right now as we speak. They're fasting. They're praying right now. They started at 12. They're going to be going for another 35 minutes. They're fasting due to this bill, and they're just crying out to God because, again, prayer is action. That's the number one thing that all of us should be doing. And so it's been amazing to see them become so passionate about this life and death issue, and that's one example. That's just in my circles. Yeah. There are Christians all over the state that are rising up, that are praying, that are speaking up boldly about these issues, and you guys should too.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us for this special episode, inaugurating Season 3, bringing you these crucial and very timely updates so that you can get the facts, stand for truth on life, family, religious freedom. This is Moses Bratford and Grace Evans from Minnesota Family Council. We're so excited that you're joining us for another season. So much fun content, incredibly timely updates coming to your inbox every week, and also if you subscribe on email. But also remember, hit us up on Anchor, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, and Instagram. Instagram, we share short clips all the time. YouTube, we share the full-length episodes on video, and of course, podcast platforms. So you can get the audio, make your commute a better time with the Family Beacon podcast. And with that, I'll leave you. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.